All right. Well, welcome and thank you for joining us for our 50th anniversary year of Special Collections and Archives at Georgia State University. We are having a conversation today with 6 of our community partners and contributors to the Special Collections and Archives at Georgia State. So I will go ahead and introduce each one of them. First is Lucy Draper. She is a founding mother of our women's collections. We have Bob Scar, who is the founding archivist from the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. We have Tyson Deal, curator of her father Stephen Deal's photographic collection. Franklin Abbott, who is our, I'm gonna have to cheat here a second, longtime community activist in the LGBTQ plus community, as well as our first donor to the Gender and Sexuality Archives. We have Lily Pabian, the executive director of We Love BuHi, and Judith Thompson, who is the CEO of South Carolina Nurses Association. So welcome to you all. So I have a series of a couple questions to ask you, and feel free to jump in. I'm going to start with our first question. Lucy, if you want to go ahead and answer. The question is, why is it important to you or your organization to preserve your collections?
50 years ago, when I began my feminist activity, I noticed that the unsung heroines in the movement were not documenting the prices that they were paying and the work that they were doing. And I felt that the important role that I played in the various organizations that I founded was to encourage women to save their work product and their collections, and that their collections were of value. 50 years later, to a person, when we asked them to give their collections to Georgia State University, they agreed to do that. We didn't receive but one no, and we are still working with her and expect her to give her collection also.
Anyone feel free to jump in.
Oh, well, Christine, I'll be glad to talk about why I think it's important to preserve the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation, and also a shout out to Morna for all of her good leadership over the years that I've known her. The Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, the archives tells the story of one of the largest performing arts groups in the Southeast. The Atlanta Symphony Orchestra is under the umbrella of the Woodruff Art Center, which includes the High Museum and the Alliance Theater. But the archive clearly documents the achievements of the 4 past music directors. We have, in a lot of ways, the collection parallels the growth of the city of Atlanta. We have a wonderful collaboration with Georgia State as far as helping us to digitize the collection and make it available to a lot of different entities, which I'd love to talk about a little bit later.
Anybody else want to jump on that
question?
Yeah,
I'll jump on. Hi, everyone. I'm Lily Pabian. I'm the executive director of We Love BuHi. That is Buford Highway. I think that a lot of people know Buford Highway, especially if you are an Atlanta native like myself. We partnered with the Special Collections with Georgia State University, I believe since 2017. I came on board around 2019 as the new executive director. But absolutely, it's the cornerstone. It has become the cornerstone of our mission of preserving the multicultural culture of Buford Highway that's been around for 40 plus years. I actually grew up on Buford Highway back in the late 70s. And so just seeing the changes, I think that's one thing Atlanta is known for, is certainly the evolving changes of the city and its people. And it's just super important that, immigrants have played such a huge part of the growth and the vibrancy. I mean, they pretty much brought the world to the South. So it is certainly a very special place in a lot of people's hearts. And the stories themselves is really what encapsulates it, and to humanize it. Because I think that even the word immigrant has had its share of just biases and stereotypes, and so we really are trying to use these stories as a way to humanize and to break down barriers, and that's just something that's super important for us. So thank you so much. I'm so happy to be part of the 50th celebration. Thank you.
I also am very happy to be part of the celebration. Prior to working with Morna and the former director, Stephen Zeitz, I knew that archives existed, but I didn't know that they were so dynamic. And I'm a collector of things. I had boxes and boxes and boxes of letters and memorabilia, some of which I had received from friends who died in the AIDS epidemic. And one of the cautionary tales for me was that during that time, before I had an understanding of archives, many people simply disappeared when they died. Many artists and writers and people who had a great deal, when they died, their papers just went to the dump. And so they are forgotten, what they contributed is forgotten. And I was hanging on to little bits and pieces, feeling, overly responsible, really. So Steve and Morna arrived at my house, and something that they liked very much that I thought was weird was they liked all the unsorted stuff, because they could then sort it and organize it. And I am not a very well organized person. Like I say, I kept it all, but it was, hither, thither, and yon. And boxes would be dumped into boxes over a long period of time. So I was delighted to, let these letters and papers and memorabilia go to a place where they could find a home, where there were no bugs that would get in them, no dampness that would get them. And I can now park my car in my garage, which is it's a thrill. So I really appreciate being there. I think as a writer and an activist, my legacy is what I've done. And, this is the best thing that could happen to me. And by extension to a lot of my fellow activists and writers that I have worked with, and I have saved their letters and saved their work. I was just out of the blue, the mother of a deceased friend called me yesterday. Her son, Jude St. Martin, was an African-American writer who had lived in Atlanta and who died, maybe a decade ago. And she said, "Do you still have any of Jude's writing?" And I said, "Well, there's a file at the archive at Georgia State University that has his name on it and has many of his fine pieces of writing in it." I said, "It is preserved." And it really touched her. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Franklin. Tyson or Judith, do you want to jump in on this question?
Yeah, I think that was a good segue, Franklin, to where I am and what I am about and what I've donated to Georgia State's archives. So thank you, Christina, for having us. This is an exciting opportunity, and happy anniversary. Happy birthday, Georgia State Archives. My dad's name was Steve Deal, and he passed away in 2012. And he was a photojournalist for the Atlanta Journal and Constitution from 1971 on until the late 90s, so almost 30 years. And my dad did not throw one thing away. And after he passed away, well, actually, before he died, he wasn't in great health, and he was very depressed. And I ran across some boxes of photographs, like just photos. And I saw like the most handsome photograph of Paul Newman I've ever seen. I saw Watergate. I mean, just amazing photographs. And I was like, Dad, did you take these? And he said, oh, yeah. And I'm like, these are the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Why are these in boxes? And he's like, oh, no, nobody cares about that, like, but so his life and his art was in all of these boxes. And so I encouraged him. I'm like, we have to do something with these. And he didn't make it, and we didn't together be able to come out with anything together with the photographs. But they're such a treasure, and it's almost 30 years of Atlanta's history and all this stuff from the early 70s on. And I really just, my dad just thought he was just a person with a camera, but he had this amazing eye, and he was able to capture people's essences and like just who they were in this beautiful, beautiful way that because of his humility and how humble he was, it's not out there, and it wouldn't be out there if I, if I wouldn't, release it to the world. And so that's what I'm really thankful for, is the opportunity to share my dad's work and for people to see who he was through his eye of photography. And it's also, to me, the end of an era is what he represented of print photography, of film photography, and that whole news, the newspaper and the hustle and the bustle and that media that we are so far away from. And it's amazing. And just his little pieces of paper of his assignments that his editor gave to him, and like his lists of who he, what he covered this day and that day. Like, to me, those are just, I don't know, I couldn't throw them away. So I was just thankful that there's somewhere for them, and that maybe someone can find something valuable in them. But I just am so thankful to have a home for my dad's collection.
Judith, did you want to respond, or do you want to go to the next question?
Yes, certainly. I came to the South Carolina Nurses Association in about 1984, and noticed that there were boxes and boxes and boxes of things all over our, at that point, very large office, and began to do some exploring, and found out very quickly that there was this wonderful place in Georgia that had already taken some materials from the South Carolina Nurses Association. So I really didn't have to do too much exploring, which was a good thing, because frankly, we didn't have anything that's comparable here in South Carolina that I could discover. So this was a really great gift to us. And it astounded me to find out that I had gone to work for an organization that was over 100 years old. And it really brought all kinds of excitement to me to think about how people went around in wagons and with horses and came for meetings. I was enchanted by the whole idea. I'm a very active member of several organizations myself, and I just didn't see myself, even at that time, the concept of getting on a horse and riding to Columbia to do some politicking was a bit more than I was able to deal with. So this was a truly remarkable kind of an activity. I am not a nurse myself, which is what lots of people ask, are you a nurse? No. The last person you want by your bed is me. But it really is the kind of thing where I've always had a great admiration for nurses. And part of it had to do with my upbringing, and a nurse that was very, very prominent in my life, very positively. So this was just a great opportunity. But I had gotten to know the opportunity of being with the Nurses Association because of my political activities. And one of the members of the organization, the University of South Carolina College of Nursing had invited me to teach about politics. I mean, how a bill becomes a law. And I thought, oh my, doesn't everybody know that? And found out quite quickly, no, everybody doesn't know that. So it was a wonderful combination of just a sort of serendipitous activities. And that was just before we were getting ready to go to live in China for a year, which was a fascinating experience too. But I came back and I thought, I had worked in China doing what I had gone to college for, and that was music. And that was fun. And I came back and I thought, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And that's when this job popped up in the newspaper. And I knocked on the door and said, I would like to interview. And they said, good, we'd like to have you. So it's been that kind of interesting sort of a thing. And from then on, it's been a wonderful growth experience to watch how people who are so dedicated to taking care of other people in their careers are learning on a regular basis to take the skills that they have and move them forward so that we can move nursing forward in our state and hopefully in the nation. So that's what's been very exciting. And you all have been a wonderful help to us because you have taken some of those valuable pieces of information that we have gathered through the years and have kept them in a place that will make them secure. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And Judith, if you don't mind, I'd like to kick off the next question with you because I think it's a really good segue. So who would you like to see using your collections?
Well, I would like to see anyone who is interested in women's issues, anyone who's interested in nursing issues, of course, and anyone who's interested in looking at the growth and development of organizations and the growth and development of women in healthcare. And so I think those would be some really good kinds of people to take a look at what is available for one organization in one state out of 50, but one that's been around for a long time.
Anybody want to follow up how
Oh,
you would like to
Christina,
see your collections used?
Oh, I would love to follow up with that. The Atlanta Symphony Orchestra collection is already being used by the ASO staff when we're doing writing our program notes or highlighting musicians, or we sometimes we need to go back into the scrapbooks or the concert programs, which, by the way, we have an entire collection, complete collection of all the concert programs from 1945 to this past March, and they're all almost digitized, and you can view them online. But the ASO staff relies a lot on that. The musicians, they love to be able to go back and we have all of our audio files from 1974 to present digitized, and even some before that into the 60s when Henry Sopkin was the music director. But anyway, so the musicians love to be able to go back and hear their performances or the interpretation of what the conductor was trying to do during that concert. And we have patrons that call all the time saying, Bob, I'd love to have a photograph of the one that you had with me and Yo-Yo Ma and blah, 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 you know. So, but what's really touching is sometimes you get kids who said, hey, my dad or my mom sang in the ASO chorus or played in the orchestra, and I want my grandchildren to know a little bit more about them. So you know, we go back into the files and we're able to find pictures and recordings of them. And most recently, we have researchers from other schools working on their musicology thesis, and so they rely heavily on the scrapbooks, which kudos to your team and Kevin especially in getting a grant to digitize some scrapbooks from the 40s and 50s, early 60s. So yeah, our collection is being used a lot.
in addition to the scholars who use the women's collection, and we've been very impressed by how many have, both undergraduate, graduate, and faculty, I would like to encourage outreach into the community, particularly from the 5th through the 12th grade, and develop curriculum and instruction models for the Georgia public and private schools to encourage them to use these collections, particularly because so many of them are now online. And in the beginning, I had mixed feelings about the collections being online, but now I think it's a blessing, and I would like to see that expanded into the public and private school communities.
Well, I echo that from Bob, and it's a very important thing is be able to pass this forward on to the next generation of students, of scholars, because one of the things I did recently was do a Zoom with Georgia State University. It was a classroom, and we talked a lot about immigrants and particularly with COVID and the disproportionate impacts. And I think it's super, and I started getting these follow-up texts and messages from students, which really surprised me. But they reached out and said, how much these stories really got them to think about their own parents' journeys, or maybe their grandparents. And I think it's super important for people just to know heritage and history. I think those are two things that are really important to ground us. So yeah, I think that we definitely want the youth, but we also want policymakers, people that, that create the world, the people that run the world, for them to do this type of deep dive. I mean, ultimately, this is research. This is really learning and in a very boots to the ground way. And it's very, very testimonial and anecdotal. But those are the things where, particularly with our project and listening to people's voices, and I mean, it's one thing to read things, but it's very different when you actually hear the voices of those experiences and the points of decisions people had to make. What were they feeling? What were they thinking? What made them shift a certain way? I think all of those are super important, and I would like more policy people and makers to, I welcome them to listen to our stories.
I was just graduating from high school when the Stonewall riots occurred, which marked the beginning of the modern gay movement. And so the things that I have collected go back to that time. And it's an unusual thing, I think, to be sort of at the have awareness at the beginning of a movement that has come so far, since 1969. And I think that not only for younger people whose experiences are very different, for them to be able to say, well, what was it like? And, to read letters or to hear interviews. I've done a lot of oral histories to accompany my collection. Students and graduate students, people who are doing research on the movement and want to know some of the human side of it can certainly delve into the collection. And there have been some interesting things that have occurred as a consequence of the oral histories. I have done a number of oral histories with older women and men. And when these people die, the families are so grateful, to have the oral history, that it gives them something that they can, it's just an amazing thing because it's a life review told in the person's own words. And Georgia State has been really, really, top notch in terms of collecting oral histories, which is a wonderful way of preserving stories that, once somebody's gone, that story is lost.
With my father's collection, Steve Deal, I just hope that people who are looking for something like his images can find them. Students, researchers, historians, artists, curators. I mean, I think I just would like for it to have a life of its own, I guess. Ju- More than I could ever imagine, or, more than would be if it were sitting in a closet somewhere, But there's just so many images, like, who is that? Maybe somebody knows, So that's what I would love to see, but for it to be used and appreciated, and just, the history is kept alive through the images.
Hey, Christina.
Yes.
I want to say something to Tyson. There's a lot of times we're looking for photographs that are related to the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra that we don't have or can't find. And I can't tell you how many times Kevin has gone into the photograph collection, and I bet some of the photographs that I'm seeing came from your dad. So
I bet so. Yeah, I'm sure they're in there.
especially of the old the old municipal auditorium there on Cortlandt Street, which is, of course, part of Georgia State now.
Yeah. Yep. I bet you they're in there. I mean, anybody who's looking for anything Atlanta from that era, it's very likely in that collection.
Right.
There's
And
over
would you
100,000 images.
and would you remind me of what is his first name again?
Steve, and
Yeah,
like,
okay, yeah.
his byline was Steve Deal, and that was just that simple. Steve Deal, Deal.
And I think that brings up a really good point too, that a lot of these collections, and as you're all talking, there's a lot of, interrelated connections between them, and, overlapping themes. So I think that that's a really important thing. And I know that when our students and scholars and any researcher that's using these collections, oftentimes they think they're going to go with one collection, and as they kind of dig into it, they start going into all the different collecting areas, and start finding these materials, because once you kind of get in there, you realize that there are all these extra connections.
Yeah, and Christina, to that point, I'm hoping that when some folks are researching the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra archives, they also might find information that Bruce Kenny, the president of the Atlanta Federation of Musicians, has signed a deed of gift to, I guess, is Lisa Vallon, right? And those two collections are so integrated in so many ways. So plus Suzanne Shaw has donated her Robert Shaw collection. I think that just took place here in the last couple of weeks. So
Wow.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Well, Bob, I'm gonna kick the next question to you, actually, and kind of keep going on this theme. So combining resources with a public institution makes this an important collaboration between your organization and us. What about this collaboration is productive beyond just keeping the records within the community, and for those of you who have personal collection, your personal collection? So what is it about this collaboration?
well, I mean, initially, when I was trying to put the archives together in 2012, I brought in all the leading Atlanta archivists as an advisory group, and they all suggested there's only two places that your collection needs to go to, and it's either should be Georgia State or the University of Georgia. And Georgia State is only 5 stops on MARTA, so that was a no-brainer. But it's just, first of all, it's the professionalism of the staff. It's the knowledge that you have in how to properly digitize and preserve items. Hey, I didn't have any space at the Woodruff Art Center, so that's another. I'm not sure if that's the intention of your question, but we needed. I can't tell you how many grants that we wrote that encouraged us to look for an outside repository in the city of Atlanta. So we did, and there's more people looking at the collection now because of this collaboration. So, and just to re-emphasize what I said earlier, how the ASO collection there has opened doors for other collections, such as the Atlanta Federation of Musicians and the Robert Shaw documentary material.
Anybody's free to chime in if you want to pick up this question.
I'll chime in. I think it's super, it just made sense for us, being 7 miles north approximately of downtown Atlanta. Georgia State is the concrete campus, right? And it's a beloved concrete campus, but it has a large footprint. I think that the fact that it is it's a public school, the fact that we definitely, want to partner and appreciate the integrity you guys put into this from an academia standpoint. A lot of our work right now is certainly filling in the public humanities space. And so I think it really, and how we interpret that is really operationalizing academia, all the things of, society and, philosophy, all of that stuff. It just made the perfect sense for us to partner with you guys. And it's just been such a great journey. We're sort of young in this. And so we're learning as we're growing this as well. But we are just so happy and grateful to have you all as experts, as subject matter experts, and guiding us. So it's been great, and we really appreciate this collaboration.
Oh, I have to also mention the School of Music and Wade Weist. That collaboration there has been huge for us. Huge for us.
What I have found remarkable about Georgia State University is their willingness, an almost breathtaking willingness, to collect on controversial or what were considered controversial subjects. That was not true in many of the archives that approached me personally for my collection. And I did not want to edit any truth out of my collection. I wanted the price that women paid. A personal friend even was driven at West Point when we founded West Point now, was driven to take her own life. And I felt like I owed these women a great debt. And Georgia State University was willing, the archives, special collections, was willing to take the risk of total honesty in these collections. And for that, I am eternally grateful.
I feel the same way, that whatever has been there has found a place. And I also appreciate so much that as a public institution, it is open and available to the public. And that is not true of many private institutions. You have to get lots of different levels of permission to get in. But I think that, you have an amazing staff. They are enthusiastic, well beyond what's expected. It's obviously, a labor of love for many of them. And I believe that because of that, it was not an easy thing for me to donate my collection. I am also a psychotherapist, and I had to go through every box, usually with Morna or Steven Zeitz with me, to make sure that none of the confidential materials connected to my psychotherapy practice and my clients went into the collection. That means I have to handle every piece of it. And so much emotion was attached to things, and I would, that we'd get a box together and then I'd go look at the box and say, oh, I can't let go of this and I can't let go of that because there was too much attached to it. And then I realized is that I just couldn't read those letters. I didn't want to throw them away. I wanted them to be somewhere that maybe one day I could read them or they could be read. Maybe there will be a Ken Burns in a future century who will find something useful there, find an interesting story, an interesting person. But you guys just do a wonderful job of helping us to feel absolutely safe and secure that what we are giving you will be well cared for, will be used, and will be made available. And that there's nothing that we can present that is going to be too controversial or that can't be accepted on its own merits. So thank you.
Judith or Tyson, do you want to pick that one up or you want to move on to the next question?
I don't think I have anything to add to that. I've just been enchanted by listening to these stories. You don't know that organizations have the wealth of background sometimes, or how passionate people really are in various and sundry activities. It's really wonderful, and to have a place where that can be highlighted makes a marvelous opportunity for future generations.
I agree. I felt like Georgia State was the perfect place for my dad's collection because, well, it's Atlanta, and they already house Atlanta Journal's photography collection, and it makes sense to keep it together. And my mom graduated from Georgia State University with her PhD in reading instruction, so that's pretty cool. So I grew up running around Georgia State as a kid in the library and all over the place. So it's like a homey feeling place to me. It's really close to the AJC downtown, the old offices. And I have this vision of that beautiful space where all the tables are and the windows that overlook the city, and just people sitting down with my dad's photographs with some gloves on or something, but like just searching through them to find, what they're looking for. Like my dad covered all the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment things. There's beautiful, amazing photographs of the like picket lines and all sorts of stuff at the Capitol. And then he also covered the Vietnamese refugees who came to Atlanta. And there's some incredible photographs of that. Gay rights, there's amazing photographs of parades. And I know there's got to be symphony photographs, and just it's like there's something for everybody who has ever come through Atlanta, and it's in there somewhere. So I just love the idea of people digging through it to find it.
Tyson, I definitely want to go through your father's archives. My father actually, and this was in the 70s, but it was when Deng Xiaoping was coming here to visit. And my father was part of the group that was picketing against that. And they all showed up at Jimmy Carter's home. And I remember watching it on a black and white TV. We were in New York at the time. We were moving down here, but he was down here first. And I remember seeing my father on TV in this tiny little box. He was shaking. He was so passionate about what he was saying, what he believed in. And I went to the Jimmy Carter Museum and I looked at some pictures of the visit when Deng Xiaoping came here. But oh my gosh, I was so hoping to see my father. And so I'm going to be looking. My father unfortunately passed away from COVID last year, 2020. So I am just just can't wait to look through that. So thank you for donating that.
Oh, thank you. This is just such a great conversation. I feel like we could keep going. So Tyson, I'm going to toss the next question out to you. What current archival gaps do you see? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean Tyson. I meant Lily. Sorry, Tyson. You can jump in too, but I want to kick it off with Lily. Sorry. What current archival gaps do you see in your community? For example, are there things that you wish were collected or should be collected?
You know, there's a lot of complexities within our communities because we are a community of multiculturalism. We've got 26 plus languages spoken here. So trust is a big piece of it. I don't know if that's necessarily a gap, but it's certainly something we have to work hard at to achieve, to obtain the trust. I think there's also a lot of, people don't understand the magnitude perhaps of their story, or they don't understand, well, who's going to listen to me? Why is my story important? So really trying to educate and to raise that awareness of the importance of this project. We tend to put our heads down and go our day-to-days. But this whole project speaks to something greater, something larger. And I think that is the piece that we are those are the gaps we try to fill, through our work of advocacy. And, it takes a conversation at a time. So if anything else, I think it's time, more time would be great, because that is the area that we really need to work through.
Yeah, and Christina, for me, it's the oral history. I mean, we have bits and pieces in the collection, but I have to do a better job of organizing that part of the collection with people that are alive today, and there's I think, like what Lily said, there's a little bit of an issue with time, but that's got to be front and center going forward. I mean, some of the musicians that are retired, they have wonderful stories to tell about conductors that they performed under. They have wonderful stories to tell about artists. They have stories that maybe they shouldn't say about conductors and artists that are just fascinating to listen to. A lot of really good backstage banter going on, and it needs to be captured.
I think there's so many stories in the LGBTQ plus community that it's hard to collect them all. We, like any community, we're full of older people, and if we don't get to them and get their story, that story is going to be, for the most part, lost. Certainly lost as an arc, a life story. And what I would encourage you guys at Georgia State to do is perhaps to work with various departments that would be connected with these different collections and train some students to do oral histories. I have tried to encourage other people to learn to do it. I will continue to do it because it's so important. And every time somebody dies and I haven't gotten their story, I just, it's kind of like a little bit of a heartbreak for me, because I so value that. My own mother died this past August, and I had gotten her story, and so it's a treasure. It's a treasure for me and for my family, and for anybody who wants to understand what being the mother of a gay man was like. it's just part of how these different collections can expand. The way that history is shared in the future will be both what's in the newspaper, so to speak, whatever the newspaper is, and these stories. The stories are so important. And I think some of the stories that I've been able to record were from some of the first people from India who came to Atlanta. And the story of, like Dr. Prateen Desai, who recently died. He was one of the first Indian professors at Georgia Tech. And he came over on a boat. And, there were no Indian restaurants. There was not an Indian community. How did he, and then bringing his new wife over here, how did they make it? What was their grit? What was their fortitude? What was their story? Because that was such the first immigrants were so brave, because they came over here and often not knowing anyone and struggling with the culture. So those are fascinating stories, and we have to get those.
Frank, let's join forces.
Any other thoughts on archival gaps in the collections?
I think there might be more outreach into rural communities. I grew up on a remote South Georgia farm. I was a country doctor's daughter down in South Georgia near the Florida line. And a number of women stepped out in these communities during the women's movement and risked their jobs, their marriages, their reputations, and paid great prices. Eva Parker from middle rural Georgia, thank goodness, was one of our founding mothers. She has now passed away, but gave one of the most powerful oral histories in the collection. And before these women who are my age, which is 80, are no longer with us, I would like that they be sought out and that their voices be recorded.
I'm going to move on to the last question that I have for you all. What other resources do you see lacking in your own communities or personally to preserve your future?
I don't, Christina, for me, it's without a doubt records management schedule. I need to do a better job of capturing the important documents from each of the different divisions of the orchestra. In other words, the marketing, the development, the artistic planning, the education areas, and a lot of it's born digital. And how do we extrapolate that and bring it into and add to Kevin's workload?
I agree. The digital part is really important. I'm still putting pieces of paper in boxes and saving them for Morna and periodically delivering those. But I have offered and we've started a process like so many processes that was interrupted by COVID to basically let you download my computer, because so much of my correspondence from the past 15 years, has been online. And that stuff also has value. It's part of the story. I feel like my story is in the middle of a lot of stories. And I've encouraged some of my friends like Cal Goff, who is active with the archives as well, to give their letters. We just did an interview with Cal, so that, I tease, I say, well, we'll be in good company after we're dead. Our stuff will be together. So I want the digital stuff there too. I think that's really important.
Anyone else want to pick up on that?
Lily, how many of the newspapers from the communities out on Buford Highway have been collected and archived?
I know we tried at one point, but the interviewee, the subject, she, after hearing her voice, just wasn't comfortable. But no, I mean, I think that's a really, really great point, is looking at the hyper local media groups that are here, these sort of grassroots, particularly within the Latino immigrant groups. There's a lot of these publications that are out there for them. So I think that's a really good point, Frank.
Well, I know I've encouraged the people at Cobber, which is the Indian magazine, to participate in giving copies to the archive. Again, because that's just a, one person's death or the fire in a house, everything could be gone. And it's such a vital part of the history. I think that, probably the most interesting and vital thing that has been happening in Atlanta over the past several decades has been the emergence of immigrant communities. It's just made a whole difference in terms of how Atlanta sits.
And with that, there is, because, a little bit back to the gaps, is you have so many these ecosystems, and they are, I mean, immigrants tend to stay within their particular ethnic group. I mean, that's kind of a natural thing, right? You speak the same language, you eat the same foods. And so part of our work also is we don't serve a specific demographic. We really do serve the collective multicultural that is Buford Highway, and really trying to identify and raise awareness of those community centers, because there are numerous ones. Chinese Community Center is the one that I've been tied to, just because my father was one of the original founders, with his, again, coming together into this country, trying to figure out who are my people, where's my community, and how do I feel connected to them. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of work for us to do. I think where we lack is human resources and time. Those are the two things that seem to be, slowing us down. But we definitely want to push forward at a faster rate, because you're right, it's so important. And when a life goes, I mean, there's so much of that history that is just gone. I was watching Antique Roadshow, which is my husband and I's favorite thing to do. And there was this one segment that was so fascinating. This man brought up that his great-great-grandmother was actually the first female aviator, before Amelia Earhart, and how she designed her own plane and how she flew it, and all of this stuff that nobody knew about. And they said, well, the father burned everything one night in a fire, never talked about it again. But here this guy comes with this collection. So there's so many hidden gems in these stories, and they're just so significant, each and every one of them, to the listener. So yeah, for sure.
Hey, I want to do a shout out to Georgia State. They house the great Speckled Bird collection. That was an underground newspaper from, I guess, the late 60s to the mid 70s.
That's cool.
And we recently got creative loafing as well. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have Cole Porter,
What's that, Franklin?
Johnny Mercer,
Mm-hmm.
the Johnny Mercer collection. That's so important.
Yeah.
He was such a figure.
Yeah, including a lot of those sort of napkin scribbles and things that never actually made it into music, and our students are turning them into songs. It's great.
Played by Joe Granston and his band.
Yep.
That's so cool to hear about creative loafing. I remember interviewing Cliff Bostock when I was in journalism school at Georgia State. I know he's still around, but that's really great.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's great because a lot of these things all interconnect, and I, for us, we're just so excited to build these partnerships and maintain them, and just watch this magnificent archive just continue to grow. We started, like I said, 50 years ago in 1971. We did an oral history project over the summer with several former employees of Special Collections and Archives, and our founder, Dr. David Gracie. He said when he arrived, they had this idea, but there was no physical space. The then library director handed him a box and said, "Here you go." So, like one box of stuff, and now we've got 4 storage areas and just millions of things. So it's incredible, how we've grown over the last 50 years, and I'm really excited to see, how we continue to grow going forward. So I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Does anybody have any final things they'd like to say that maybe we missed in our conversation?
Well, I hope that when there's the 100th anniversary of the archive is celebrated, that we'll be there because you've done this, Christina.
In some way, shape, or form, I
Yes.
hope that you all will be there.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you all. And I hope you'll have a great afternoon.